October 28, 2020, Baytown, Texas. It's a quiet night in this quaint Houston suburb.
What people love about Baytown is the community is very close-knit. A lot of people know each other.
It's oil workers. It's everything somebody would think of as far as hardworking, good old USA.
By 5 a.m., one hardworking Baytown resident, Brenda Summers, is up and ready to start the day, but it will soon be hurled into chaos.
Brenda was getting ready for work, and all of a sudden she hears a loud noise resembling a gunshot. When she looked out her window, she witnessed a person being shot in their car.
Oh my God.
She immediately called 911.
911 says it's an emergency. Somebody just got shot in the head out here. Oh my God, he's shot right square in the head. Holy. Stay on the phone with me, okay? We're gonna get someone out there.
Within minutes, Baytown police arrive at the apartment complex where Brenda lives on the north side of town.
They're looking at the victim inside the vehicle, consistent with what was reported on 911. Her foot is on the brake. The brake lights are still on. The engine is still running.
It's obvious to them that this person has been shot multiple times.
Police quickly realize they're too late to render first aid.
Unfortunately, there was no pulse. She was already dead.
The first things that homicide detectives want to know at a murder scene is who is their victim.
Obviously, they're trying to figure out some identification, and they look down and they see that the deceased woman has a fanny pack.
When they look inside, they discover a Texas license.
The victim is 31-year-old Jasmine Garrett.
Once you know as a homicide detective who your victim is, you can start conducting what's called the psychological autopsy. Who is this? This is not just a body in front of us. This is a person.
Born and raised in Indiana, Jasmine Garrett always had an affinity for the arts.
Jasmine had such a creative mind. It didn't matter if it was arts, writing, that's how she expressed herself.
She loved to read, she loved to paint, and people gravitated towards her because of that free spirit.
Jasmine's the type of person that dreams big and has a big heart. Some people may say a hopeless romantic.
Jasmine was eager to see what the world outside her Indiana hometown had to offer.
She made a huge decision to move to a big city, and that city was Houston, Texas.
Growing up in a small town, the lure of the big city can seem very enticing.
And shortly after moving to Houston, Jasmine found love with a man named Calvin Ray.
Calvin was another free spirit just like Jasmine, and they really connected over their love of adventure.
But in 2018, the couple got some unexpected news that would change their life forever. Jasmine was pregnant with twins.
One newborn is a lot, but two are overwhelming. So Calvin and Jasmine really struggled to stay afloat.
And things became even more challenging when Jasmine lost the help of her partner.
Jasmine's boyfriend and the father of her two twins got into some legal trouble, unfortunately, and was sent to jail.
Jasmine was already facing the challenges that come with being a new mother, but now her partner has become locked up.
She really needed some help.
So Jasmine reluctantly sent the twins to live with family members in Indiana, while she worked to create a stable environment for them in Houston.
She was making decisions that would help benefit them in the long run.
Jasmine was on her grind. Her main focus was affording an apartment and getting her children back.
She's working 12-hour days as a driver with rideshare companies to save up money so she can get an apartment of her own and have a place where her children can come to.
The last thing on Jasmine's mind was finding romance. But one night on the job, romance found her.
She picks up a handsome passenger named Robert Roberts.
Robert?
Yeah, Jasmine?
That's me.
Okay. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you? How's the night?
It's better now.
She was smitten. He was congenial. He was funny. He swept her off of her feet.
He had a personality that was outgoing and fun.
Actually, you mind if I move up front?
Oh, no problem. Go for it.
All right.
Like Jasmine, Robert was a single parent, working hard to provide for his kids.
These two right here, is yours?
Yeah, those are my babies.
I actually, I got two of my own. That's them right there.
Robert is a young father taking care of his children. And that said to Jasmine that he's a provider, he's a protector.
Before long, the two were inseparable.
They were so wooed by one another. They had already started planning to create this life with one another.
They ended up leaning on each other. They became each other's person.
So how did Jasmine end up shot to death in the Houston suburb of Baytown?
She had one gunshot to her left cheek, one behind her ear, and then another in her forehead. It seemed like overkill.
Homicide detectives look for things that are out of the ordinary, disorganized. What is it about this scene that is telling this story?
They see a sign on her dashboard that indicates she's a car share driver.
Which provides investigators with their first lead.
Was Jasmine picking someone up at this apartment complex?
Police believe she may have been targeted by one of her passengers.
In October of 2020, single mom Jasmine Garrett was on the grind.
She gets with a rideshare company, starts making money that way.
Jasmine was working 12 hours a day so that she could save enough money to get her own apartment, get her children back.
Jasmine was determined. She was going to make something of her life.
And when she picked up a charming passenger, Robert Roberts, she thought she'd found a kindred spirit.
The two of them were forging a very tight relationship, providing each other the support that they needed in order to be successful.
But now Jasmine has been found shot to death at an apartment complex in the Houston suburb of Baytown.
Crimes such as this you really don't see very often in Baytown, Texas. They are trying to figure out what in the world just happened.
Investigators immediately notice that her rideshare sign is lit up.
They also noticed that her cell phone was missing. And so the police ascertained that this could have been a robbery by one of her potential passengers. There was stippling present on the gunshot wounds, which means she was shot at very close range.
It is clear that this person didn't just fire a weapon at Jasmine. They were right on her. They were perhaps within inches of her head when they fired this gun.
These shots were all intentional, close range, and that tells us that the gunman was not taking any chances of Jasmine surviving. He wanted to make sure this person was dead.
Inside Jasmine's car and on the ground around it, investigators locate 3 .40 caliber shell casings.
So now, you know that Jasmine was shot with a .40 caliber pistol.
The casings were bagged as evidence and sent off for ballistic testing. Police hope they'll eventually be able to match them to a murder weapon.
Investigators also collect a parking pass hanging from Jasmine's rearview mirror.
It looks similar to parking passes hanging in other surrounding vehicles.
Detectives take that parking pass with the intentions of providing it to the apartment staff to see if they can verify if she is a tenant.
But first, they want to speak to their eyewitness, the woman who called 911, Brenda Summers.
At this point, she's the only one who saw what happened.
Miss Summers, can you tell us everything that you remember?
Of course. I was getting ready for work.
Brenda reiterates what she told dispatch on the 911 call, that around 5 a.m., she heard 2 loud bangs outside her apartment.
Brenda says that as she looks outside, she can see a man standing outside the driver's door of Jasmine's car.
She describes the killer as being a black male, about 5'9", wearing a white t-shirt and a red beanie hat.
He's also wearing a white medical mask.
I saw him shoot her square in the forehead, and then he ran.
She says he ran off to a wooded area, and that's when she called 911.
Oh my God, he shot right square in the head. Holy.
Do you recognize either of them from the apartment complex?
No, never saw them before.
Although Ms. Summers' description of the assailant is helpful, the detectives know they need more.
Thank you for your time, Miss Summers.
So they immediately go to the leasing office to speak with the manager to inquire as to whether or not the apartment complex has surveillance videos.
Can you pull up the footage around 4 a.m.?
Yes. The apartment complex has great security footage, and so they sit down and they begin to watch what unfolded.
At 4 a.m., detectives see a man matching the description given by Brenda Summers enter the apartment complex.
He's just lurking in the shadows, back and forth in front of this one particular apartment building.
Then at 4:52, detectives can see Jasmine exit one of the apartment buildings and walk directly towards her car in the parking lot.
The suspect hangs back a little bit. He waits until after she gets into her car before he approaches her vehicle.
They engage in what appears to be a heated discussion for several minutes.
And detectives already know what happens next.
The masked man fires into the car 3 times.
Jasmine's entire murder was caught on tape.
But in reviewing more of the surveillance footage, detectives noticed that the killer didn't run into the nearby woods like Brenda Summers thought.
After shooting Jasmine, he ran back to a white SUV, and the vehicle speeds immediately out of the apartment complex.
Who's driving the SUV?
Within hours of Jasmine Garrett's murder, police have discovered surveillance footage that shows the entire shooting go down. But several questions still remain.
Who is the masked man who shot her? And who is driving the white SUV that drove him from the scene?
When they roll back the footage, detectives see the white SUV arriving at the apartment complex just after 4 a.m.
So they're pretty confident the killer wasn't a resident of the apartment complex or someone Jasmine was picking up a part of a rideshare.
This murder was not a random robbery. Whoever killed Jasmine had her as a personal target.
This killing was planned and premeditated.
Unfortunately, though, detectives can't make out the getaway vehicle's license plate.
Can you zoom in more than that?
Unfortunately not.
Investigators are very frustrated during this time. It's almost too good to be true. It's not every day that a murder takes place that you can see it on footage, but you're missing so much information.
In hopes of trying to get more information about that white SUV, detectives assemble a group of foot patrol officers to kind of canvass the area.
Okay, let me know as soon as you find anything.
With that search underway, detectives have more questions for the manager of the apartment complex.
Detectives were not sure as to why Jasmine was in the apartment complex in the first place. They didn't know whether or not she was there to drop off or pick up a passenger, or if she actually lived there and was about to start work that morning.
Now, after looking at the surveillance video and seeing Jasmine exit one of the apartments, their belief is she possibly lived there.
Found this in the car.
Investigators hand over to the staff the parking pass that was found in Jasmine's car.
That's one of my passes.
However, it's not a resident parking pass.
The apartment management said, that's a visitor pass. That's not what the residents have.
Do you have records of tenants and visitors?
Yeah, let me look.
They were able to track down who provided that visitor pass.
The pass is linked to an apartment being leased by a man named Joel Pratt.
They make contact with Joel and bring him into the station for an official interview.
Listen, appreciate you coming in. I'm sorry we have to meet like this, all right? But we do need to sit down and see if we can help this out. I'm gonna sort of go over everything again, all right? So, what do you know her as? What's her name to you? What do you call her?
Jazzy.
Jazzy?
Mm-hmm. Her name is Jasmine Garrett.
Joel says he and Jasmine became fast friends after she moved to the Houston area in 2016.
It was completely platonic. Joel is a gay man.
And when money got tight for Jasmine after the birth of her twins and their father's incarceration, Joel was there to help.
She asked Joel if she could crash on his couch for a while, and he agreed. Joel provided that safety net for her as she was getting her finances back on track. He gave her a place to stay.
You talk to her throughout the day your stay, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is that common? Y'all talk, text, phone call, whatever?
Talk, text.
While she's out working. Everything seems to be fine?
Mm-hmm.
Joel remembers the evening before that Jasmine had come home pretty late, and she appeared to be really tired from working a 12-hour shift.
Hey.
Tired.
Long day, huh?
Very long day.
And they spoke for a little while, telling them about their day.
And then she crashed on the couch.
She seemed perfectly fine.
She was tired.
Didn't indicate any issues going on that day. Or just seemed like a normal driving around doing her business day.
It was just like a really big problem or something like this. She would have let me know.
The detectives have no reason to doubt Joel's story, and he doesn't appear to resemble the shooter in the surveillance footage.
They can easily rule him out as the person who killed Jasmine.
But they have to wonder, does he have any idea who did?
They ask him if he knows anybody who would want to harm Jasmine Garrett.
To detectives' surprise, Joel has an answer right away.
Joel tells detectives that she had been involved in an on and off again relationship.
They had the problems. They were going through it and everything like that. She would tell me about it. She would tell me everything, but she told me about it.
Who's this guy?
Roberts?
He goes on to tell detectives that while he's never met Robert, the stories Jasmine shared were concerning.
Like, she was just like, she was throwing stuff and she's like, she was scared.
Texas police investigating the homicide of Jasmine Garrett have discovered she was living with a friend named Joel Pratt at the time of her murder. Now in an interview room, Joel has named a possible suspect.
Apparently, Jasmine was in an on and off again tumultuous relationship.
Who's this guy?
Roberts?
Joel never actually met Robert Roberts in person. He had only heard about Robert from the stories that Jasmine told him, and those stories were pretty horrific.
Him and her had some problems earlier this year, and they got into an argument.
Joel told detectives this one, just bizarre story involving Robert and Jasmine.
She had to go up to her parents, or up in Indiana. Okay. They have kids.
Joel tells detectives that the last time Jasmine went to Indiana to visit her family, Robert went with her.
They were already having problems, but they were on and off. He didn't want nobody else along with her. So he went with her.
Robert had this desire that he had to control her. He had to control every aspect of her life.
On the drive back, Jasmine pulled over to get gas in Little Rock, Arkansas, when a stranger walked up behind her.
Jasmine was inappropriately approached by a man.
Or some dude had touched her or something, rubbed her finger up her back, and then she turned around thinking it was the guy she was with. The dude told her, "I'm sorry, I just wanted to see your face," and she told me, "You don't need to touch people like that."
Robert sees this, but instead of running to her aid, he actually assaults her.
Hey! What the hell you doing talking to another man, huh?
To me, Robert.
He slapped her upside the head and told her,
Like her?
yes, hit her upside the head and told her don't talk to anybody else. Then he got tussling.
Now, you think he would grab the man, this stranger? No. He attacked Jasmine, slapped her right there, right in front of everyone.
Good luck on your own.
Joel says Robert took off in the car, abandoning Jasmine at the gas station.
He takes off in her vehicle?
No, it was a rental at the time.
Whatever rental.
Left her there at the store.
She was left with no money and no means to get back. She really had to try to figure things out.
She ended up calling Joel.
Joel, I need your help.
Joel Pratt is able to drive to Little Rock, Arkansas, and pick her up.
Jazzy, let me see. Jazzy, this is crazy.
I know. I'm so done with him. I swear I'm done after this.
But Robert wasn't done terrorizing Jasmine.
What is it?
Oh my God.
Roberts has hacked into her social media accounts and has began to post sexually explicit pictures of her.
They were pretty explicit photos.
Yes, very explicit. Jasmine does not upload pictures like that. These were inappropriate pictures. Like, real inappropriate. One of those things that get you blocked off Facebook, like, in an instant.
I'm so sorry, Jazz. Look, let's just go home and we'll take care of that later, okay?
Okay, it's so embarrassing.
Joel says when they got back to Houston, Jasmine took legal action against Robert.
She made a report about that in Houston?
Yeah, she made a report. She had a big knot right here and it had stitches in it, and then she had a stitch on her lips. She looked like a fish for like 3 days.
The domestic violence case against Robert was still pending, but Jasmine was relieved to have him out of her life.
However, Jasmine's relief was short-lived.
It was a short period where she had begun to relax. But then one day, Joel says that he came home and he found Jasmine frantically packing her bags.
I walked around the corner and said, "Hey, Jazz, you all right?" She thought I gotta get out of here. What happened?
I gotta go. It's not safe for me here anymore.
She saw Robert and he had a gun.
She walked up the walkway and he came around the corner and put a gun in her face. Told him next time we see you, he's gonna kill her.
She say why? What was the issue?
So the guy was angry.
Better watch your back. Your days are numbered.
Thank you for everything.
You don't have to leave. You'll be safe here. Please don't go.
Jasmine was so scared that she moved out of Joel's apartment and started staying in motels.
Unfortunately, Jasmine could not keep up the financial commitment that it took to stay in different hotel rooms every night. So eventually she leaned on her friend Joel again and moved back in with him.
Moved all her stuff out of there and she came stay with me.
She moved back in with Joel about a week prior to the shooting.
The investigators are stunned by everything they're hearing. And if it's true, they agree that Robert is their #1 suspect in this crime.
Anything else you can think of? Here's my card with my information on it. All right. What I want you to do when I get you back there, I want you to see what you can find out of this cat. Okay?
When detectives run Robert's name into their database, they discover that Jasmine had indeed filed police reports against Robert for attacking her.
Robert also looks eerily similar to the man from the surveillance footage.
Detectives are eager to speak with Robert Roberts, but locating him is no easy task.
He's not answering phone calls. He's not showing up to any of the previous addresses that police have on file for him.
As officers continue patrolling the area for Robert, detectives do some additional digging on the white SUV that served as Robert's getaway vehicle on the morning of the crime.
They determined it's unlikely that the vehicle belonged to Robert.
When reviewing the DMV records, they noticed that he drives a black sedan and not a white SUV as seen in the surveillance video.
They're digging around looking for any sign of that white SUV.
And when investigators dig into Robert's social media page, they find just what they're looking for.
The detectives find a profile picture of one of Robert's friends standing next to a white SUV that matches the exact description of the getaway vehicle.
The woman's name is Candace Oliver.
How was she involved in this? Did she want Robert all to herself?
She could help plot this whole thing.
With a history of abuse exposed, Jasmine Garrett's ex-boyfriend, Robert Roberts, has become the prime suspect in her homicide investigation. But police believe he had a willing accomplice.
Someone driving a white SUV was Robert's getaway driver on the morning of the crime.
They were able to find the identity of the person who owns the white SUV. Her name is Candace Oliver.
Investigators are having difficulties tracking down Robert. So in the meantime, they shift their focus to Candace.
Police bring Candace back to the Baytown police station for questioning.
They immediately press her about her relationship with Robert Roberts.
I met him through a friend, though, y'all. This was years ago. I guess he kept going around, you know?
Candace shared with detectives that, yeah, she knew Robert Roberts and that they used to date on and off, but now their relationship kind of grew more to a platonic relationship, more of a brother-sister type relationship.
Detectives ask Candace about the last time she saw Robert. She tells them it was on October 28th, the same night of Jasmine's murder.
So October 28th, which was a Wednesday, shows up at your house, correct?
Right.
You remember about what time it was around?
It was about 2 something.
So maybe 2 in the morning.
Yeah.
What are you doing here?
Look, I need you to do me a favor.
Robert asked her, I need you to drive me somewhere.
Oh, Robert, it's 2 a.m.
Please.
So he never called you ahead of time, text you, message you, anything about, hey, what's going on? Can I come out? I want to come out or anything like that. Nothing like that. Just showed up.
Yes. It was really shocking because I haven't seen him for a minute. And he was like, yeah, take me somewhere. I was like, where can I take you?
But you owe me after this. Where are we going?
I'll explain to you on the way. But come on, we gotta hurry.
You asked him, where do you want me to take? What did he tell you?
He said, just drive.
Once in the car, Candace says Robert began directing her towards Baytown.
It was a quiet ride.
Did he tell you where to go?
No, he just said, go here.
All right, so what do you mean, go here? Did he give you like a location to drive to? You put in your phone, like directions? Or did he say, go here, here, here?
He just said, here and up.
Candace told detectives that she continuously asked Robert, what's going on, where are we going, why are we going, but Robert refused to tell her and just only simply stated, just keep driving.
You're not even asking him, well, we going out here, who you to see?
I kept asking him that the whole time. He was not trying to give me any answers.
The drive from Spring to Baytown, or really, the west end of Houston to the far east end of Houston, can take anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour. It's a long time to be in a car with somebody and not know your destination.
Candace says they eventually arrived at a Baytown apartment complex.
I just parked, I cut my car off, and I just sat in the car.
And what did he do while he's there?
He got out the car.
Candace says she never saw Robert with a gun.
He gets out. He's got nothing with him.
No.
In other words, he's not carrying anything.
That's what I'm kind of shocked.
Gets out and starts walking around, or walks away from the vehicle.
Right.
Okay.
And it was so dark I didn't see him anymore.
When detectives asked Candace what it is she thought Robert was there to do, she says she's unsure, but figures he was there to see another woman.
He probably got women all over, you know what I mean? It ain't no man you want this. My mama would say anything that's open at 12 and above is nothing but legs. I'm a woman, so in the back of my mind, what woman you want to see now?
Candace does tell detectives that in the past, Robert had mentioned a young lady by the name of Jazz, but that she had never met her personally. After waiting for about 10 or 15 minutes, Candace began to call Robert to inquire as to what's going on.
I had called and said, what's going on? It's time to go. What are you doing? You know what I mean?
What does he say?
He hung up the phone.
About 30 minutes later, Robert finally returned.
Okay. When he got back to the vehicle, was he just walking, running, jogging?
He was walking.
He's walking. Everything seemed normal.
Yes.
She says he didn't seem nervous or suspicious at all.
Next thing I know, he gets in the car and we leave.
Gets into the vehicle. He says what?
Drive.
Candace says he didn't say anything about who he came to see or what he was there to do.
Candace tells detectives that she never saw Robert with the gun, nor did she hear any gunshots while she was waiting for him to come back to the vehicle.
Her story is certainly suspicious. It's possible that she knows more about what happened than she's letting on.
In an attempt to encourage Candace to be more forthcoming, they decide to show her the crime scene photos from Jasmine's murder.
This is what we're working. That's what he did. That's what he did. That's why we're at this point right now. That's Jazz.
Guess who drove him to the crime scene and drove him away from a crime scene? Exactly. Guess who's involved in it? Yes, ma'am.
Despite her loyalty to Robert, she agrees to go on record that the man in the footage is Robert Roberts.
This is him.
That looks like him, yeah.
But where is Robert now?
They have their case. They just don't have him.
Police in Baytown, Texas finally have enough to arrest Robert Roberts for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, Jasmine Garrett. His reluctant getaway driver, Candace Oliver, has positively identified him as the shooter in surveillance footage.
This is him.
That looks like him, yeah.
While the evidence seems to be ironclad and squarely pointing at Robert as the shooter, there's one issue. They still don't know where Robert is.
Candace said she hadn't heard from him since the night in question.
They have him at the location. They have him in the vehicle. They have him captured on tape. They have their case. They just don't have him.
Weeks go by without any sign of Robert until April 13th, 2021.
Baytown police get a tip that Robert is hiding out over 300 miles away in New Orleans. With the help of New Orleans police, they're able to arrest him without incident and extradite him back to Texas.
They're hoping that they're going to get a confession out of him.
Mr. Roberts, I'm Detective Zukas, Detective Gonzalez, Baytown Police Department. Let's sit down and speak with you for a minute.
But Robert refuses to give a statement, let alone a confession.
Robert asserts his right to have a lawyer present, effectively terminating the interview.
I'll talk to you guys when I have my lawyer for you. Anything you want to know when I have no lawyer. Okay. So you don't want to talk to you locate or speak with your attorney, correct?
Regardless, investigators have what they need to charge Robert with first-degree murder.
They don't have Robert's confession. They don't need it. They're convinced that they have enough evidence and enough information to convict Robert Roberts of this horrible murder.
And when his trial begins in September 2023, prosecutors present their theory.
They have the story to tell of Jasmine and Robert. Started off as two people who leaned on each other, who cared about each other, but also a story of rage and envy a story of domestic violence, a story of abuse.
The next time I see you, I'm gonna kill you.
Once Jasmine found out about Robert's true colors, she did everything she could to leave him, even filing domestic violence charges.
The prosecution's theory is that Robert couldn't get over it.
Prosecutors believe that Robert was fueled by anger and distress and that he had to control Jasmine.
He knew that she had filed domestic violence charges against him, and he knew that was the ultimate sign that he was losing control over her.
Prosecutors argued that Roberts would do anything to control Jasmine, including taking her life. And on the evening of October 28, 2020, that's exactly what he did.
Prosecutors say that night Robert drove to the home of his friend, Candace Oliver, and asked her for a ride.
I need you to do me a favor.
They claim this was a careful calculation to avoid his own vehicle being seen at the place of the crime.
I'll be right back.
He waited and lurked outside in the shadows. He waited for his opportunity to trap Jasmine in the confines of her vehicle.
The fact that he was able to wait for her to come out shows that this wasn't only a crime of passion, it was premeditated and it was planned.
As she was getting into her car, Roberts revealed himself and confronted her.
Hey, yo, Jazz, we need to talk.
Robert, what are you doing here?
So you really thought the police was gonna help you, huh?
Robert shot her 3 times in cold blood, killing her instantly.
For some reason, he took her phone. Investigators aren't entirely sure as to why.
Oh my God, he shot that square in the head. Holy.
While a neighbor called 911, Robert fled back to Candace's SUV and returned to her place in Springfield.
If it had not been for the surveillance video, Robert may have gotten away with this.
After a 5-day trial, the jury retires to deliberate.
After hearing all the horrific facts of this case, it didn't take long for them to come back with the verdict.
Robert Roberts is found guilty of first-degree murder and is sentenced to life in prison.
He won't be eligible for parole until April of 2051.
Candace was never charged in connection to the crime due to her cooperation with police and the fact that she truly seemed clueless as to what was going to happen that night.
This is a classic case of fatal attraction. And no matter how hard she tried to get away from Roberts, he was so fatally attracted to Jasmine that he was not gonna stop until he took her life.
This was an individual who, in a premeditated and cold-blooded fashion, sought out a person that he just couldn't let go of.
Though someone may present charming and loving and caring, we have to pay attention to the first sign of abuse. It's important to leave because it won't change.
Domestic violence happens in cycles, and we oftentimes want women, men, who's ever involved in a violent situation, why don't they just get away? Why don't they just get help? Jasmine tried. If you're involved in a domestic violence type of situation, get help. And when you hear, "Baby, I love you to death," be wary of that statement, because they just might.
Abuse is never okay. If you or someone you love is in an abusive relationship, there is help available. Call the Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE.
The summer heat settled over Staten Island like a heavy blanket on the afternoon of July 17, 2014. The sidewalks along Bay Street shimmered beneath the sunlight, storefront windows reflected the slow movement of traffic, and people carried on with routines that felt ordinary enough to be forgotten by the end of the day. Delivery trucks rolled through intersections. Conversations drifted between neighbors standing outside small businesses. The distant sound of passing buses blended with the rhythm of another New York afternoon. Nothing about those first moments suggested that one encounter on a neighborhood sidewalk would soon become one of the most recognizable incidents in modern American history. Some stories begin with a carefully planned crime. Others begin with a mystery that investigators spend years trying to solve. This story begins with something far more unsettling, because it unfolded in full public view. There was no hidden alley, no anonymous suspect disappearing into the night, and no question that something extraordinary had happened. Within hours, millions of people would be watching the same few minutes of cell phone footage, pausing, rewinding, and asking the same question from different perspectives. What happened on Bay Street? Was it a lawful arrest that ended in tragedy? Or had the limits of police authority been crossed in a way that would forever reshape the national conversation? The answers would never satisfy everyone. Even today, more than a decade later, the death of Eric Garner remains one of the most debated incidents involving law enforcement in the United States. Courtrooms, television studios, classrooms, city council meetings, police academies, and family dinner tables have all returned to the same images, searching for certainty inside a sequence of events that seemed both painfully simple and overwhelmingly complex. By the time the afternoon was over, a husband, a father, and a grandfather would be dead. A police officer's career would eventually come to an end. A city would once again confront questions about race, policing, and accountability. A single sentence, spoken repeatedly during a struggle on the pavement, would become one of the defining slogans of an entire generation. Those words would echo far beyond New York. To understand why that happened, it is necessary to step back from the headlines and the protests. Before the demonstrations, before the television debates, before politicians, activists, attorneys, and commentators transformed the incident into a national symbol, there were simply people standing on a sidewalk in Staten Island during the middle of an ordinary Thursday. Every person present arrived carrying a different understanding of the moment. Police officers believed they were responding to a complaint connected to the illegal sale of untaxed cigarettes, a low-level offense that nevertheless fell within their responsibility to enforce. Eric Garner believed he was once again being singled out by officers who had stopped him repeatedly in the past. Nearby witnesses saw a familiar interaction between police and a local resident. None of them could have predicted that someone nearby was holding a cell phone capable of preserving nearly every second of what followed. That recording would transform a local police encounter into an international story. Unlike countless incidents that depended entirely on conflicting witness statements, this one unfolded before a camera. Yet the existence of video did not eliminate disagreement. Instead, it intensified it. Millions of viewers watched identical footage, while reaching dramatically different conclusions. Some focused on the decisions made before physical contact began. Others examined the restraint techniques used during the struggle. Medical experts analyzed the final moments. Legal experts debated standards of criminal liability. Former police officers discussed training, tactics, and split-second decision-making. Civil rights advocates pointed to a broader pattern extending far beyond one arrest. The video answered many questions. It also created countless new ones. America, in 2014, was already wrestling with complicated conversations about policing and race. New York City, despite dramatic reductions in violent crime over the previous 2 decades, continued to debate how aggressively officers should enforce minor offenses. Supporters argued that strict enforcement discouraged more serious criminal activity and helped maintain public order. Critics believed the approach placed disproportionate pressure on minority communities and encouraged unnecessary confrontations over relatively minor violations. These debates did not begin with Eric Garner. They did not end with him either. His death became one chapter in a much longer national story, but it was a chapter impossible to ignore because the evidence was visible to everyone. Unlike written reports or courtroom testimony, video possesses an unusual power. It invites viewers to believe they are witnessing events firsthand. Yet even video has limitations. Cameras capture angles, not intentions. They record movements, not thoughts. They preserve words, but cannot fully explain the emotions or assumptions that existed before the recording began. Every frame contains information, but every frame also leaves something outside its borders. That reality would become central to everything that followed. Investigators would examine reports, interviews, medical findings, department policies, and expert opinions. Attorneys would study every movement visible on the recording. News organizations would replay the footage countless times. Protesters would march while carrying signs bearing the final words heard during the encounter. Police organizations would warn against drawing conclusions from only a few minutes of video. Families would grieve. Politicians would promise reform. Journalists would reconstruct timelines measured in seconds. But on Bay Street itself, none of that future was visible. The neighborhood had witnessed police activity before. Officers knew the area. Residents knew many of the officers. Street vendors, shop owners, commuters, and pedestrians shared the same sidewalks every day. Familiarity can sometimes reduce tension, but it can also create frustration. Repeated encounters between the same individuals often carry the weight of previous experiences, remembered differently by each person involved. Eric Garner was not an unknown figure in the neighborhood. At 43 years old, he stood well over 6 feet tall, with a broad frame that made him instantly recognizable. Years of health problems had complicated his life, and steady employment had become difficult. According to public records and later reporting, he often sold individual untaxed cigarettes, commonly known as looses, on the street. The practice violated New York tax laws, though it was considered a relatively low-level offense. Police officers had interacted with Garner numerous times before July 2014. Those previous encounters mattered because they shaped expectations on both sides. Publicly available recordings from the incident reveal Garner expressing frustration about being approached yet again. His words suggested that he believed he was being unfairly targeted. Officers, meanwhile, were carrying out responsibilities assigned under departmental policies that emphasized enforcement of certain quality-of-life offenses. Between those two perspectives lay a widening gap. History has shown that tragic outcomes sometimes emerge not from elaborate criminal conspiracies, but from ordinary situations that escalate unexpectedly. A traffic stop. A routine call. A neighborhood dispute. A misunderstanding that grows faster than anyone involved anticipates. The death of Eric Garner belongs to that category of events whose consequences became immeasurably larger than the incident that first brought people together. As afternoon sunlight continued to reflect off the pavement, a call reporting suspected illegal cigarette sales prompted officers from the New York City Police Department to respond to Bay Street. It was the kind of dispatch handled countless times each year. No emergency alarms sounded. No reports described an active shooter or armed robbery. Nothing in the available information suggested that history was about to change course on a Staten Island sidewalk. The officers arrived expecting to address a complaint. Eric Garner was already there. Within minutes, a conversation would become a confrontation. A confrontation would become a physical struggle. A struggle would become a medical emergency. And a medical emergency would become one of the most consequential law enforcement incidents of the 21st century. The images captured that afternoon would not remain confined to police evidence files. They would travel across television networks, newspaper front pages, computer screens, and mobile phones around the world. Millions of strangers who had never visited Bay Street would come to recognize its cracked pavement and brick storefronts. Millions more would remember exactly where they were the first time they watched the recording. For some, the video represented undeniable evidence that excessive force had been used. For others, it illustrated the dangers officers face when arrests become physical confrontations. For nearly everyone, it represented a moment that demanded difficult questions about authority, responsibility, accountability, and the value of human life. Long after the sirens faded and the crowds dispersed, those questions remained. They remain today. Because the story of Eric Garner is not only about one man, one officer, or one arrest. It is about the fragile line separating routine from irreversible, the immense power carried by a single recorded moment, and how a few minutes, on an ordinary summer afternoon came to influence conversations across an entire nation for years to come. In the chapters ahead, we will carefully reconstruct that day, examine the documented evidence, and follow the long path from a sidewalk on Bay Street to a debate that continues to shape American society. The story of July 17, 2014, cannot be understood by examining only the final minutes captured on a cell phone camera. Those moments, repeated countless times across television broadcasts and social media feeds, became the defining image of the case. Yet every defining moment has a history behind it. Streets carry memories. Institutions carry policies. Individuals carry experiences that shape how they react long before a single word is spoken. To understand why a routine police response became one of the most consequential incidents in modern American history, it is necessary to begin with the city itself. New York has always been a place of contradictions. It is celebrated as a symbol of opportunity, diversity, and resilience, while simultaneously confronting enormous challenges created by its size, population, and inequality. Millions of people move through its neighborhoods every day, each carrying different expectations of what the city represents. For some, it is a place where hard work can build a future. For others, it is a city where opportunity exists alongside poverty, where prosperity and hardship often occupy neighboring streets. Staten Island, the borough where Eric Garner lived, occupies a unique place within New York City. Compared to Manhattan's towering skyline, or Brooklyn's crowded avenues, Staten Island often feels quieter and more suburban. Residential neighborhoods stretch between commercial districts. Ferry commuters travel back and forth each day, connecting the borough to Lower Manhattan while maintaining a distinct identity of its own. Bay Street, where the incident occurred, reflected that mixture of everyday life and economic struggle. Small businesses lined sections of the street. Local residents gathered outside shops to talk, smoke, or simply watch the afternoon pass. Delivery trucks stopped briefly before continuing their routes. Buses carried passengers toward the ferry terminal. Nothing about the area suggested it would become internationally recognized. For the people who lived there, Bay Street was simply part of home. Like many urban neighborhoods, it also served as a place where police officers maintained a visible presence. Officers responded to calls ranging from serious emergencies to relatively minor complaints. They dealt with disputes between neighbors, traffic incidents, thefts, assaults, and violations of city regulations. Most interactions ended without attracting attention. Few became newsworthy. But policing in New York, during the early 2010s, existed within a larger framework that had developed over decades. One of the most influential policing philosophies during that period was known as the broken windows theory. The idea, first introduced by social scientists in the early 1980s, argued that visible signs of disorder, such as vandalism, public drinking, fare evasion, or illegal street sales, could encourage more serious criminal behavior if left unaddressed. According to supporters, enforcing laws against relatively minor offenses helped maintain public order and discouraged violent crime before it could take root. New York City's leadership embraced elements of that philosophy throughout the 1990s and into the following decades. During those years, violent crime declined dramatically. Many officials credited proactive policing strategies as one important factor, among several that contributed to the city's changing crime rates. Supporters viewed the approach as a success. Critics viewed it differently. Civil rights organizations, community leaders, and many residents argued that aggressive enforcement of low-level offenses disproportionately affected minority neighborhoods. They questioned whether repeated police encounters, over relatively minor violations, created unnecessary confrontations and damaged trust between communities and law enforcement. Those debates were already well established by 2014. They existed long before Eric Garner encountered police officers that July afternoon. Within the New York City Police Department, officers worked under policies designed to balance enforcement responsibilities with public safety. Every shift involved countless decisions requiring judgment. Officers frequently responded to situations where they possessed limited information before arriving at the scene. Dispatch calls often contained only brief descriptions provided by callers whose understanding of events could be incomplete. Training emphasized officer safety while encouraging communication whenever possible. Yet no amount of training could eliminate the uncertainty inherent in police work. An encounter that appeared routine could become dangerous within seconds. Conversely, situations initially viewed as threatening often ended peacefully through conversation alone. That uncertainty shaped every patrol. It also shaped expectations. For residents who experienced repeated police contact, another patrol car arriving on the street could represent frustration rather than reassurance. For officers answering multiple calls each day, another complaint might appear to be one more routine assignment among many. Between those perspectives lay a gap that was not always visible until conflict emerged. Eric Garner understood that gap from his own experience. Born in September 1970, Garner spent much of his life in New York. Friends and family described him as outgoing and deeply connected to those around him. He possessed an unmistakable physical presence. Standing approximately 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighing close to 400 pounds, he was difficult to overlook in any crowd. Yet his size often contrasted sharply with descriptions offered by people who knew him personally. Family members remembered his humor, generosity, and willingness to help neighbors whenever he could. He enjoyed talking with people. Conversations came naturally to him. Those who spent time around him often recalled his laugh before they recalled anything else. Life, however, had not been easy. Garner struggled with chronic health conditions, including asthma. Public records also documented heart-related health issues that would later become significant during the medical examination following his death. Physical limitations made consistent employment increasingly difficult. Like many Americans facing financial hardship, he searched for ways to support himself and contribute to his family's income. Among those methods was selling individual untaxed cigarettes, commonly known as loosies. The practice violated New York tax laws because cigarette taxes applied to unopened packs rather than individual cigarettes. Selling single cigarettes without collecting applicable taxes constituted a low-level offense. It was not classified as a violent crime, but officers were authorized to enforce the law when complaints were received. Garner had previously encountered police regarding this activity. Those earlier interactions mattered. Repeated contact with law enforcement can influence how individuals interpret future encounters. Someone who believes they have been unfairly singled out may respond with visible frustration before any physical confrontation occurs. Likewise, officers familiar with an individual through previous incidents may approach future encounters with expectations shaped by prior experience. Neither perspective necessarily reflects the complete truth. Both influence human behavior. Publicly available information indicates that Garner had expressed frustration about repeated police attention before the events of July 17. During the encounter captured on video, his statements reflected a belief that he was being targeted once again. Whether others shared that perception became one of many questions discussed after his death. Beyond Eric Garner and the responding officers stood another important figure, whose role would only become fully understood after the incident had already ended. Ramsey Orta was a local resident carrying a cell phone. In 2014, smartphones had already transformed how ordinary people documented public events. Encounters that once existed only through official reports could now be recorded by witnesses standing only a few feet away. The technology itself was neither activist nor journalist. It simply preserved images. Those images, however, possessed extraordinary power. Throughout history, photographs and video recordings have repeatedly altered public understanding of significant events. They compress distance. They remove the barrier between eyewitnesses and audiences thousands of miles away. Instead of relying entirely upon written descriptions, viewers experience moments almost directly. Yet recordings also possess limitations. A camera frames only part of reality. It begins recording at a particular moment and stops at another. It captures visible actions while leaving unseen conversations, previous interactions, and internal decision-making outside the frame. Those limitations would become central to nearly every discussion surrounding Eric Garner's death. Legal experts analyzed the footage differently from medical examiners. Police trainers examined different details than civil rights advocates. Journalists focused on chronology. Attorneys focused on standards of proof. Families focused on loss. The public often focused on emotion. Meanwhile, New York itself continued moving through another humid summer. Tourists crowded Times Square. Wall Street traders monitored financial markets. Construction crews worked beneath towering skyscrapers. Children attended summer programs while families planned weekend gatherings. Across the city, thousands of police officers answered routine service calls that never appeared in national headlines. The dispatch that afternoon to Bay Street initially appeared no different. According to official accounts, officers responded after receiving information regarding the suspected sale of untaxed cigarettes. Such complaints did not automatically suggest violence. They generally required officers to investigate, determine whether a violation had occurred, and respond according to department procedures. No one responding to that call could reasonably anticipate that it would become one of the most scrutinized police encounters in American history. The officers arrived expecting another routine enforcement action. Residents continued their conversations. Pedestrians continued walking. Traffic continued flowing. Life appeared entirely ordinary. Yet history often changes without warning. It rarely announces itself beforehand. No flashing sign informs witnesses that they are standing inside a moment future generations will study. There was no indication that afternoon that a cell phone recording lasting only a few minutes would eventually be viewed tens of millions of times, referenced by presidents and mayors, analyzed in police academies and law schools, cited during protests across multiple continents, and remembered as a defining chapter in the national conversation about policing, race, accountability, and justice. The setting was ordinary. The people involved believed they understood their roles. The policies guiding police conduct had been written years earlier. The legal framework already existed. The neighborhood had witnessed similar encounters before. But history is shaped not only by institutions and policies. It is shaped by the unpredictable intersection of individual decisions, human emotion, physical circumstance, and the irreversible passage of time. As the afternoon sun continued beating down on Bay Street, Eric Garner remained outside near local businesses where neighbors recognized one another by name. Police officers approached to investigate a complaint they believed fell within their duties. Nearby residents watched with varying degrees of interest, unaware that one witness had already begun preserving the next chapter of American history through the lens of a cell phone camera. Within minutes, a familiar encounter would move beyond routine conversation. Within minutes, the ordinary would become irreversible. Eric Garner was already a familiar face long before the world learned his name. To millions of people who would eventually watch the cell phone video, he became frozen in time as the large man standing on a Staten Island sidewalk during the final moments of his life. His image was reduced to a few minutes of footage replayed endlessly across television screens and social media feeds. But no human life can be measured in a single recording. Before he became the center of a national debate, before politicians argued over his death, before legal experts analyzed every movement captured on camera, Eric Garner was simply a husband, a father, a grandfather, a neighbor, and a man trying to navigate a life that had become increasingly difficult. Born in September 1970, Garner grew up in New York during a period when the city was very different from the one visitors know today. Many neighborhoods struggled with high crime, economic hardship, and declining public services. Families learned to adapt to changing circumstances, relying heavily on one another and on the communities surrounding them. Those who knew Garner often described him as someone who enjoyed being around people. He was naturally talkative, the kind of person who could begin a conversation with a stranger while waiting outside a store or standing on a sidewalk. Friends remembered his sense of humor. Family members recalled how easily he laughed and how quickly he could make others laugh with him. His physical appearance made him impossible to overlook. Standing approximately 6 feet 3 inches tall and weighing close to 400 pounds, Garner possessed an imposing frame. At first glance, someone unfamiliar with him might have assumed he was intimidating simply because of his size. Those closest to him often described the opposite. They remembered a man whose personality was far warmer than his appearance initially suggested. He loved spending time with his family. His children remembered a father who enjoyed conversation more than silence. Relatives described family gatherings where Garner became one of the loudest voices in the room, telling stories, joking with relatives, and making sure everyone felt included. Like many families, they've experienced disagreements and difficult periods, but they also shared birthdays, holidays, neighborhood cookouts, and ordinary afternoons that rarely become part of newspaper headlines. Those ordinary moments are often what disappear when tragedy enters public memory. After a widely publicized death, people frequently remember only the incident itself. The decades that came before slowly fade into the background. Yet those years contain the details that explain who someone truly was. Life, however, had presented Garner with challenges that became increasingly difficult to overcome. He experienced chronic health problems for years. Asthma affected his breathing long before the events of July 2014. Medical records later introduced during investigations also documented heart-related conditions. Carrying significant body weight placed additional strain on his health. Tasks that others considered routine could become exhausting. Employment opportunities narrowed as physical limitations increased. Financial stability proved equally difficult. Like countless Americans struggling through periods of unemployment, Garner searched for ways to earn enough money to support himself and contribute to his household. Stable work was not always available. Temporary jobs came and went. Medical issues complicated opportunities that required physical labor. Eventually, he turned to selling individual untaxed cigarettes, commonly called loosies. The practice was illegal under New York tax law, because cigarette taxes applied to sealed packs rather than individual cigarettes. Selling single cigarettes without collecting the required taxes violated state regulations. It was considered a relatively low-level offense rather than a violent crime, but it nevertheless attracted police attention when complaints were received. For Garner, the activity represented income. For law enforcement, it represented a violation requiring enforcement. Those two realities existed simultaneously. Neither erased the other. Public records indicate that Garner had encountered police officers multiple times before July 2014. Many of those interactions related to allegations involving untaxed cigarette sales. As those encounters accumulated, frustration grew. By the summer of 2014, Garner had developed a belief that officers frequently singled him out. Whether every previous encounter was justified became a matter of debate, but the emotional impact on Garner himself is more clearly reflected in the publicly available video recorded during his final interaction with police. Before any physical struggle occurred, he expressed visible frustration, suggesting that he felt repeatedly approached by officers whenever they saw him. Those words did not emerge from nowhere. They reflected accumulated experiences, whether accurate, incomplete, or misunderstood. Human beings rarely react only to the present moment. They react to memory. Every previous conversation, every disagreement, every unpleasant encounter shapes expectations for the next one. That reality applies equally to civilians and police officers. Officers who repeatedly encounter the same individual often develop expectations based on previous interactions. Residents who repeatedly experience police attention develop expectations of their own. Sometimes those expectations create smoother communication because both sides understand one another. Other times they deepen mistrust before a single sentence has been exchanged. By July 2014, that relationship had become strained. Yet describing Garner only through his encounters with law enforcement presents an incomplete picture. Family members consistently portrayed him as someone deeply connected to the people around him. He remained involved in the lives of his children and grandchildren despite financial difficulties. Those relationships mattered enormously to him. In interviews conducted after his death, relatives spoke less about politics than about absence. An empty chair at family gatherings. Phone calls that would never come again. Grandchildren growing older without hearing his familiar laugh. Birthdays marked by memory instead of celebration. These are the consequences that rarely appear in legal documents. Court records examine evidence. Medical reports examine injuries. Police files examine procedures. Families live with silence. Garner's wife and children suddenly found themselves carrying two burdens simultaneously. The first was deeply personal. They had lost someone they loved. The second was intensely public. Their private grief unfolded beneath relentless media attention. Television cameras gathered outside homes. Reporters requested interviews. Photographers documented funerals. Political leaders issued statements. Activists organized demonstrations. Within days, Eric Garner's name belonged not only to his family, but to an entire nation engaged in increasingly emotional debate. That transformation happened with astonishing speed. 1 week earlier, few Americans outside Staten Island recognized his name. 1 week later, millions did. The sudden attention created another painful reality. Public figures often become symbols. Symbols simplify. Human beings do not. Some supporters described Garner almost exclusively as an innocent victim. Some critics focused primarily upon his previous encounters with law enforcement. Neither description fully captured the complexity of an actual human life. Like everyone else, Eric Garner possessed strengths and weaknesses, successes and disappointments, hopes and frustrations. He made choices. He lived with consequences. He also remained entitled to dignity, as a human being regardless of public opinion regarding those choices. That distinction became central to the broader conversation that followed his death. As legal proceedings unfolded, discussions frequently expanded beyond one individual. Questions emerged concerning policing practices, racial disparities, accountability, and public trust. While those issues deserved serious examination, they also risked overshadowing the personal story at the center of the case. For Eric Garner's family, the debate was never abstract. It was about someone whose voice they recognized immediately. Someone whose laughter they remembered. Someone whose absence could never be replaced. Those closest to him recalled ordinary details that rarely reached newspaper headlines. They remembered family conversations, shared meals, neighborhood walks, small acts of kindness that never appeared in official reports, because ordinary kindness seldom generates documentation. Such memories matter, because they restore individuality to people whose identities become consumed by public events. Every headline eventually fades. Families continue remembering. In retrospect, there is a heartbreaking irony surrounding Eric Garner's final months. Nothing suggests he imagined becoming a national figure. Nothing indicates he expected history to remember his name. Like millions of Americans facing economic hardship, he was focused primarily on immediate concerns, earning money, managing health problems, supporting loved ones, and navigating everyday life. History selected him without asking permission. His death would become associated with nationwide demonstrations, legislative proposals, police reforms, academic research, documentaries, and countless public discussions. Yet none of those developments existed on the morning of July 17, 2014. That morning began like countless others. People woke early for work. Children played during summer vacation. Businesses prepared to open. Traffic gradually filled New York's streets. Eric Garner stepped into another ordinary day carrying the accumulated weight of years that had shaped him into the man his family knew. He could not know that by evening, his life would become the subject of international headlines. He could not know that his final recorded words would echo across continents. He could not know that generations of students, lawyers, police officers, journalists, and historians would one day study the circumstances surrounding his death. At that moment, he was simply living another Thursday. A Thursday marked by familiar streets, familiar faces, familiar frustrations, and a future that still seemed unwritten. As the afternoon approached, the sidewalks along Bay Street gradually filled with residents moving through another warm summer day. Conversations drifted between storefronts. Cars passed through nearby intersections. The city continued its ordinary rhythm without the slightest indication that history was only minutes away. Somewhere nearby, police officers were responding to a complaint they believed required investigation. Neither side understood that their paths were about to cross one final time. When they did, the outcome would forever alter not only the lives of everyone directly involved, but also the national conversation about policing, accountability, and justice. The ordinary afternoon was about to end. History was about to begin. The afternoon sun hung high above Staten Island as July settled heavily over New York City. Heat radiated from the pavement, turning the sidewalks along Bay Street into broad stretches of shimmering concrete. The air felt thick, carrying the familiar mixture of traffic exhaust, distant harbor salt, and the smell of food drifting from nearby businesses. Cars rolled steadily through the neighborhood. Store owners greeted regular customers. People paused outside shops to talk before continuing with the routines that defined another ordinary Thursday. There was nothing remarkable about the weather. Nothing remarkable about the traffic. Nothing remarkable about the people standing outside on Bay Street. If someone had walked through the neighborhood only minutes before everything changed, they would have seen a typical summer afternoon in Staten Island. Neighbors talked casually. Some leaned against parked cars while others waited for buses or wandered in and out of local stores. Conversations overlapped with the sounds of engines, footsteps, and the occasional horn echoing down the street. Among the people gathered outside was Eric Garner. To many in the neighborhood, he was a familiar face. His large frame made him easy to recognize from a distance, but familiarity went beyond appearance. Residents had seen him on Bay Street before. Some knew him by name. Others knew only that he was often present around the area. Around 3 o'clock that afternoon, the routine rhythm of the neighborhood shifted. According to official accounts, police officers from the New York City Police Department responded after receiving a complaint regarding the suspected sale of untaxed individual cigarettes, commonly known as looses. Such calls were not unusual. Officers routinely answered reports involving low-level violations throughout the city. The responding officers approached Bay Street expecting to investigate the complaint. Among them was Officer Daniel Pantaleo. Publicly available records indicate that Pantaleo had previous encounters with Garner before that day. Neither man was completely unfamiliar with the other. That history, although impossible to measure precisely, formed part of the background against which the encounter unfolded. As officers approached, Eric Garner was standing near the sidewalk speaking with other people. No one nearby appeared to anticipate violence. There was no crowd running for safety. No signs of panic. No indication that the next several minutes would eventually be examined frame by investigators, attorneys, journalists, and millions of ordinary citizens around the world. The first moments consisted primarily of conversation. Body camera footage did not exist, because New York police officers were not routinely equipped with body-worn cameras at that time. Instead, the public understanding of those moments comes largely from witness accounts and the cell phone video that began recording shortly afterward. As officers addressed Garner, the conversation quickly revealed visible tension. The available recording captures Garner expressing frustration almost immediately. His voice was loud, emotional, and unmistakably irritated. Rather than reacting with surprise at being approached, he appeared to believe this was another example of what he considered repeated police attention directed toward him. His frustration did not appear sudden. It sounded accumulated. Years of previous encounters seemed to weigh upon every sentence. Garner gestured with his hands as he spoke. His posture reflected someone attempting to explain himself, while simultaneously expressing anger. He repeatedly insisted that officers always seemed to approach him whenever they saw him. The exchange remained verbal. For several moments, no physical struggle had begun. People nearby watched. Some continued standing where they were. Others slowly shifted their attention toward the growing disagreement. The neighborhood had likely witnessed arguments before. Most disagreements ended without anyone remembering them later. This one would be different. According to the video, Garner denied the accusation that he had been selling cigarettes. He continued speaking passionately. His voice carried across the sidewalk. His hands moved as he emphasized his words. At one point, officers informed him that they intended to arrest him. Exactly how each participant interpreted those moments remains a subject discussed extensively afterward. Investigations examined statements from officers, witnesses, and available evidence. While perspectives differed regarding certain details, the sequence visible on the recording provides an important timeline. Garner did not immediately comply with efforts to place him in handcuffs. He remained standing. The atmosphere changed almost instantly. Until that point, the encounter had consisted largely of conversation. Now officers moved closer. Distance disappeared. The available video shows Officer Pantaleo stepping toward Garner from behind and to his side. What happened over the next few seconds became one of the most analyzed uses of force in modern American policing. Pantaleo's right arm moved around Garner's neck and upper shoulder area as officers attempted to bring him under control. The precise characterization of this maneuver became a central issue during later investigations. Many observers described it as a chokehold. NYPD policy had prohibited chokeholds since 1993. Department disciplinary proceedings years later examined whether the technique violated that policy. The physical contact lasted only moments before momentum carried both men downward. Garner lost his balance. His enormous frame tilted toward the sidewalk. Several officers moved in almost simultaneously. Within seconds, multiple officers were attempting to restrain him on the ground. From the perspective of the cell phone camera, the movement appeared rapid and chaotic. Bodies overlapped. Limbs became difficult to distinguish. Voices rose above the noise of traffic. People nearby reacted with visible concern. Some witnesses began shouting. Others stepped closer while maintaining distance from the officers. One individual continued recording steadily with a cell phone. That decision would permanently preserve the encounter. As officers worked to restrain Garner, he remained audible. His breathing sounded strained. His voice, once forceful during the argument, now carried obvious distress. Then came the words that would forever define the case. He said he could not breathe. Again. And again. And again. Audio analysis conducted later concluded that he repeated those words 11 times during the encounter. The statement was remarkably simple. It required no interpretation. No specialized legal knowledge. No understanding of police tactics. It communicated immediate physical distress. The recording captures Garner continuing to speak while officers maintained physical control. Eventually, however, his voice weakened. His movements slowed. Witnesses later described seeing his resistance diminish. The struggle that had seemed intense only moments earlier began losing momentum. Yet the restraint continued. Exactly how long each phase lasted would later become the subject of careful timeline reconstruction by investigators, reviewing the available footage frame by frame. Seconds matter during critical incidents. Those seconds would later be replayed millions of times. Nearby civilians reacted emotionally. Some shouted at officers. Others questioned what they were seeing. Their voices entered the recording alongside Garner's repeated statements that he could not breathe. No one present understood that these images would soon become international news. For them, the incident remained immediate and uncertain. They were witnessing events without knowing how they would end. As Garner lay face down on the sidewalk, officers continued efforts to secure him. The recording shows his movements becoming increasingly limited. Eventually, he appeared largely motionless. Even then, officers remained focused on maintaining control of the situation. Questions regarding exactly when medical distress became apparent would later become one of the central issues examined during investigations and public debate. Medical emergencies can evolve rapidly. Recognizing them during ongoing law enforcement encounters presents significant challenges. Those realities became part of later testimony and analysis. What remained beyond dispute was the visible progression captured by the camera. A verbal confrontation. Physical restraint. Repeated statements indicating difficulty breathing. Gradual loss of movement. Silence. Around them, Bay Street continued existing almost as though two separate realities occupied the same space. Cars still passed. Pedestrians continued walking on the opposite side of the street. Businesses remained open. The city itself did not stop. Yet for those gathered near Eric Garner, time seemed increasingly concentrated around one motionless figure lying on the pavement. Some witnesses pleaded with officers to check on him. Others remained silent. The person recording never lowered the phone. Without realizing it, that witness preserved one of the most important pieces of evidence in the case. As additional personnel arrived, attention gradually shifted from restraining Garner to assessing his condition. Emergency medical services were requested. The transition from law enforcement encounter to medical emergency had begun. But valuable moments had already passed. The cell phone recording ends before every question surrounding the incident can be answered. Like all recordings, it documents only part of reality. Yet what it captured proved sufficient to ignite a national conversation unlike any seen in decades. Within less than 10 minutes, an encounter that began as an investigation into a suspected low-level tax violation had transformed into a life-threatening medical emergency. The officers standing on Bay Street could not yet know how history would judge their actions. The witnesses surrounding them could not know they had observed a defining moment in American public life. Eric Garner himself, now critically ill, could no longer tell his own story. The afternoon that had begun with ordinary conversations outside neighborhood businesses had crossed an invisible line from routine policing into irreversible tragedy. What happened next would determine not only the immediate fate of Eric Garner, but also the course of investigations, public outrage, legal proceedings, and a national reckoning that would continue for years. The sidewalk on Bay Street had become more than a location. It had become a scene that the world would never forget. In the moments after the struggle ended, the atmosphere on Bay Street changed with startling speed. Only minutes earlier, voices had been raised in argument. Officers had been focused on completing an arrest. Curious pedestrians had paused to watch what appeared to be another confrontation between police and a local resident. Now, the energy surrounding the scene shifted from tension to uncertainty. Eric Garner remained on the sidewalk. The cell phone recording shows him lying motionless on the concrete as officers stood nearby. His large body, which only moments earlier had been moving during the struggle, now appeared still. The heat rising from the pavement contrasted sharply with the silence that gradually settled over the immediate area. Around him, people began reacting in different ways. Some witnesses called out to the officers, urging them to check on Garner's condition. Others watched without speaking, their faces reflecting confusion more than certainty. No one standing nearby could fully understand what was happening inside Garner's body. They could only see what the camera saw. A man who had repeatedly said he could not breathe was no longer moving. As additional officers secured the area, emergency medical personnel were requested. Exactly how every decision was made during those critical minutes later became part of extensive public discussion and official review. The available evidence, including the cell phone video, became central to understanding the sequence of events, but like every recording, it documented only part of the overall response. Time, however, would soon become one of the most important elements of the investigation. Medical emergencies are often measured in minutes and sometimes in seconds. Investigators would later reconstruct the chronology with extraordinary precision, comparing dispatch records, radio communications, witness statements, video footage, and emergency response documentation. Every timestamp mattered. Every movement mattered. Every decision mattered. Emergency medical personnel eventually arrived at the scene. Their focus immediately shifted from law enforcement procedures to emergency care. Garner remained unresponsive as responders assessed his condition before preparing him for transport. Witnesses continued watching from behind the growing police presence, many realizing that the encounter had become something far more serious than anyone had expected only a few minutes earlier. The sidewalk itself had become an active emergency scene. Police officers established space around Garner while paramedics worked. Traffic continued moving through nearby streets, but the immediate area had changed completely. Conversations among bystanders grew quieter. The emotional intensity visible in the earlier confrontation gave way to uncertainty and concern. No official declaration had yet been made. No one standing on Bay Street knew whether Eric Garner would survive. He was transported by ambulance to Richmond University Medical Center. For his family, the crisis unfolded without warning. Like countless families confronted by unexpected medical emergencies, they were suddenly pulled into an unimaginable situation. Phone calls replaced ordinary afternoon routines. Relatives began trying to understand what had happened, gathering information piece by piece while hoping the situation was not as serious as initial reports suggested. Hope often survives longer than certainty. Family members could not yet know that the events unfolding inside the hospital would soon become international news. Despite medical efforts, Eric Garner was pronounced dead approximately 1 hour after the confrontation. He was 43 years old. News of his death transformed the incident immediately. Until that moment, the event had been an arrest followed by a medical emergency. Now it had become a death investigation. Every action taken before, during, and after the struggle would be examined through an entirely different lens. The New York City Police Department initiated its investigative procedures, while independent reviews would later follow. As required in deaths involving police encounters, multiple agencies became involved in examining the circumstances. Meanwhile, something else was already happening outside official channels. The cell phone recording had begun circulating. The individual who recorded the encounter, Ramsey Orta, possessed something investigators immediately recognized as critically important: a visual record of the incident itself. In previous decades, many controversial police encounters depended almost entirely upon written reports and witness testimony. Investigators often faced conflicting accounts that proved difficult to reconcile. Here, however, a civilian recording documented much of the physical struggle. That recording would fundamentally shape every stage of the investigation. News organizations quickly obtained copies. Television networks began airing excerpts. Online platforms spread the footage far beyond New York City. Millions of viewers who had never heard Eric Garner's name suddenly watched the same sequence of events. The speed with which information traveled reflected a changing media landscape. Only a generation earlier, major television networks largely determined which stories reached national audiences. By 2014, smartphones and social media allowed witnesses to share recordings almost instantly. News no longer waited for evening broadcasts. It spread minute by minute. The video quickly became the focal point of public attention. Viewers examined every visible detail. How officers approached Garner. Where each person stood. How the physical struggle unfolded. How long Garner continued speaking. What happened after he became motionless. Frame by frame, the recording was analyzed by journalists, attorneys, former police officers, medical experts, and ordinary citizens. Some believed the footage clearly demonstrated excessive force. Others argued that important context existed outside the camera's frame. The recording became both powerful evidence and the center of intense disagreement. Investigators, however, needed more than video alone. They interviewed witnesses. They reviewed dispatch records. They collected official police reports. They examined radio communications. They documented the physical scene. Every investigation requires building a complete picture, using all available evidence rather than relying upon any single source. The medical examination soon became another crucial component. The Office of Chief Medical Examiner for the City of New York conducted an autopsy to determine the cause and manner of death. Autopsies are designed to answer medical questions rather than legal ones. Medical examiners evaluate injuries, disease, toxicology findings, and physiological conditions to explain how a person died. Their conclusions do not determine criminal guilt. Instead, they provide scientific findings that legal authorities later consider alongside other evidence. The examination identified several significant factors. According to the official findings, Garner's death resulted from compression of the neck, compression of the chest, and the physical restraint used during the encounter. The report also noted contributing medical conditions, including asthma, heart disease, and obesity. Perhaps the most closely examined conclusion concerned the manner of death. The medical examiner classified it as homicide. That term generated considerable public discussion. In medical terminology, homicide means that death resulted from the actions of another person. It does not, by itself, determine whether a criminal offense occurred, or whether legal responsibility can be established beyond a reasonable doubt. That distinction would become critically important during later legal proceedings. Medical findings answer one set of questions. Criminal law answers another. Outside official investigations, public reaction intensified rapidly. News broadcasts replayed portions of the video throughout the day. Editorial writers debated police practices. Civil rights organizations called for accountability. Police organizations urged the public not to reach conclusions before investigations were completed. Social media amplified every opinion. The country appeared divided not over whether the incident was tragic, but over what exactly the evidence demonstrated. For Eric Garner's family, however, the discussion remained painfully personal. While millions debated policy, they prepared for a funeral. While experts analyzed procedure, they confronted loss. Every television replay showed the final moments of someone they had known not as a national symbol, but as a husband, father, grandfather, brother, and friend. Public attention brought visibility. It also made private grieving extraordinarily difficult. Reporters gathered outside locations connected to the family. Television cameras documented memorials. Flowers appeared near the site on Bay Street where Garner had collapsed. People who had never met him stopped to pay their respects. Candles flickered during evening vigils. Handwritten messages accumulated along sidewalks and temporary memorial displays. The location itself began changing. What had been an ordinary section of pavement slowly became a place of remembrance. Visitors arrived quietly. Some stood silently for several minutes before leaving. Others prayed. Many simply stared at the concrete where history had unexpectedly unfolded. Investigators continued their work behind the scenes. Evidence was reviewed repeatedly. Experts examined departmental policies regarding restraint techniques. Questions emerged concerning officer training, medical response, and use of force guidelines. Every conclusion required careful examination, because the consequences extended far beyond one case. The investigation had become larger than Bay Street. Larger than Staten Island. Larger than New York City. Across the United States, communities began discussing broader questions involving police authority, public accountability, and relationships between law enforcement and minority neighborhoods. Yet every national conversation still traced back to one sidewalk on one humid July afternoon. 1 confrontation. 1 cell phone recording. 1 death. The physical evidence collected from the scene could establish locations, timelines, and medical findings. It could not fully explain how a routine enforcement action had escalated into irreversible tragedy. That answer required examining not only what happened, but why it happened. Investigators would spend months reconstructing every available fact. Attorneys would later spend years debating what those facts meant under the law. Meanwhile, millions of Americans had already reached deeply emotional conclusions based upon the images they had witnessed. The investigation was only beginning. The public debate had already begun in full. And both would continue long after the ambulance had departed Bay Street, carrying away a man whose death would become one of the defining moments in the modern history of policing in the United States. The death of Eric Garner immediately transformed what had begun as a routine police response into one of the most closely scrutinized investigations in modern American history. Unlike many criminal investigations, detectives were not searching for an unknown suspect. The identities of everyone directly involved were already established. The officers had completed official reports. Witnesses had remained nearby. Most significantly, investigators possessed a cell phone recording that documented much of the encounter. At first glance, it appeared to be an unusually straightforward case. Appearances, however, can be deceiving. The central challenge facing investigators was not identifying who had been present. It was determining whether the actions taken during the arrest violated criminal law, departmental policy, or both. Those are separate questions with different legal standards, different burdens of proof, and potentially very different outcomes. As investigators assembled evidence, they began reconstructing the encounter from every available source. The cell phone video became only one part of a much larger body of evidence. Police radio transmissions established the timeline leading up to the encounter. Dispatch records documented why officers had responded to Bay Street. Witness interviews provided perspectives from people who had observed different portions of the incident. Medical reports explained the physical condition that ultimately caused Garner's death. Departmental policies outlined what officers were trained and authorized to do. Each piece answered certain questions while raising others. The first task involved documenting the chronology with precision. Investigators examined exactly when the initial complaint was received, when officers arrived, when physical contact began, how long the struggle lasted, when emergency medical services were requested, and when paramedics reached the scene. Those minutes became the foundation upon which every later conclusion would rest. Small differences in timing carried significant implications. Did officers recognize signs of medical distress quickly enough? How long did the restraint continue after Garner's movements diminished? Were medical personnel summoned at the earliest reasonable opportunity? Every second became subject to careful examination. Meanwhile, witness interviews produced a range of observations. Some witnesses focused primarily on Garner's repeated statements that he could not breathe. Others described the physical struggle itself. Several remembered the emotional intensity of the confrontation before anyone went to the ground. As is common in investigations involving multiple eyewitnesses, not every account matched perfectly. Human memory is imperfect. People standing only a few feet apart often remember the same event differently. Investigators therefore compared witness statements against physical evidence rather than treating any single account as complete. The officers involved also provided official accounts describing their decisions. From their perspective, the encounter had evolved from an investigation into an arrest after Garner refused to comply with lawful instructions. Police officers are trained to explain not only what actions they took, but why they believed those actions were necessary under the circumstances they perceived at the time. Those explanations later became important during both internal departmental review and legal analysis. One question quickly emerged above all others. Had Officer Daniel Pantaleo used a prohibited chokehold? The answer proved more complicated than many members of the public initially assumed. The cell phone video clearly showed Pantaleo's arm moving around Garner's neck and upper shoulder area during the attempt to restrain him. What investigators needed to determine was whether that movement constituted a chokehold as defined by New York Police Department policy. NYPD had prohibited chokeholds since 1993 because of the potential danger associated with restricting airflow or blood flow during arrests. Department regulations distinguished between authorized restraint techniques and prohibited methods capable of creating unnecessary risk. Experts in police defensive tactics carefully reviewed the footage. Frame by frame, they examined body position, arm placement, leverage, momentum, and the rapid movement that occurred as both men went to the ground. Some experts concluded the maneuver violated department policy. Others emphasized the difficulty of evaluating split-second physical encounters using slowed video. Those differing interpretations reflected an important reality. Departmental policy violations and criminal liability are not automatically identical. An officer may violate internal regulations without committing a criminal offense. Conversely, conduct satisfying criminal statutes may also violate departmental rules. Understanding that distinction became essential throughout the investigation. Medical evidence introduced another layer of complexity. The Office of Chief Medical Examiner concluded that Garner's death resulted from compression of the neck, compression of the chest, physical restraint by police, and contributing health conditions that included asthma, obesity, and heart disease. The official manner of death was classified as homicide. Public reaction to that finding was immediate. Many interpreted the word homicide as equivalent to murder. Legally, however, the terms are entirely different. Medical examiners classified deaths according to medical definitions rather than criminal statutes. A homicide determination simply indicates that another person's actions caused or contributed to the death. Whether those actions satisfy the legal elements of a criminal offense remains a separate question decided through the justice system. That distinction became increasingly important as prosecutors evaluated possible charges. Investigators also considered Garner's medical history. His chronic asthma had affected him for years. Heart disease placed additional stress upon his cardiovascular system. His significant body weight created further physiological challenges during physical exertion. Medical experts examined how those pre-existing conditions interacted with the restraint used during the arrest. No single factor alone explained the outcome. Instead, investigators considered how multiple conditions combined during a rapidly evolving physical struggle. Beyond medical questions, attention also turned toward departmental training. How were officers instructed to respond when a suspect resisted arrest? What restraint methods were approved? How were officers trained to recognize medical emergencies during ongoing confrontations? Those questions extended beyond one individual officer. They reached into broader institutional practices. Training manuals, instructional materials, and departmental procedures became relevant evidence. Public discussion increasingly expanded beyond Eric Garner himself. The case now represented larger concerns regarding policing practices throughout the United States. Civil rights organizations argued that Garner's death reflected long-standing problems involving use of force and racial disparities. Police organizations responded that officers frequently confront uncertain, rapidly changing situations requiring immediate decisions that are difficult to judge afterward. Both perspectives entered national conversation. Meanwhile, investigators continued focusing upon evidence rather than public opinion. Their responsibility was not to resolve political disagreement. It was to determine facts. One remarkable aspect of the investigation involved the role of technology. Only a decade earlier, an incident like this might have depended almost entirely upon written police reports and witness recollections. Instead, investigators possessed visual evidence recorded by an ordinary citizen using a smartphone. That recording changed everything. The video could be paused, magnified, reviewed repeatedly, compared against testimony, presented during legal proceedings. It became one of the most important pieces of evidence while simultaneously remaining incomplete. The recording did not capture everything. It began after officers had already arrived. It documented only one camera angle. It could not reveal thoughts, intentions, or conversations occurring outside the frame. Investigators therefore treated it as critically important evidence without assuming it represented the entire event. As weeks passed, pressure surrounding the investigation intensified. Demonstrations occurred throughout New York City. Crowds gathered demanding accountability. Public officials faced growing calls for transparency. National media organizations devoted extensive coverage to each new development. For investigators, maintaining independence amid extraordinary public attention became increasingly challenging. Every procedural decision attracted scrutiny. Every announcement generated headlines. Every delay prompted criticism from one side or another. Yet thorough investigations require time. Evidence cannot be rushed simply because public interest is intense. Legal standards remain unchanged regardless of media coverage. Prosecutors must determine not only what likely happened, but also whether admissible evidence satisfies every element required to prove criminal guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That burden is intentionally high. It exists to protect every individual within the justice system. As investigators assembled their findings, another process began unfolding inside the New York Police Department itself. Internal Affairs initiated disciplinary review independent of criminal proceedings. Unlike criminal prosecutors, departmental investigators evaluate compliance with agency rules, policies, and professional standards. An officer may face disciplinary consequences even where criminal charges are not pursued. Thus, two separate investigative paths began moving forward simultaneously. One focused upon criminal responsibility. The other examined professional conduct. Neither process guaranteed the same conclusion. Outside official investigations, Eric Garner's family continued grieving while simultaneously becoming public advocates. Interviews reflected both profound personal loss and growing determination to seek accountability. Their requests extended beyond one officer. They called for broader reforms intended to reduce the likelihood of similar tragedies in the future. What had begun as one investigation gradually evolved into something much larger. Law schools analyzed the legal questions. Police academies examined tactical decisions. Medical experts discussed restraint-related risks. Journalists reconstructed timelines. Community organizations organized forums. Elected officials proposed policy changes. Every new discussion traced its origins back to Bay Street. Investigators understood that whatever conclusions ultimately emerged would carry significance reaching far beyond Staten Island. This was no longer merely an investigation into one death. It had become a test of public confidence. A test of institutional accountability. A test of whether evidence, law, and public expectation could ever fully align after a tragedy witnessed by millions. Months of analysis still lay ahead. The most consequential legal decision had not yet been made. Soon, the evidence would leave investigators' hands and enter one of the most secretive institutions within the American criminal justice system. A grand jury would decide whether Officer Daniel Pantaleo should face criminal charges. The nation waited. The Garner family waited. And the outcome would reshape the conversation once again. By the autumn of 2014, the investigation into Eric Garner's death had moved far beyond the sidewalks of Bay Street. The physical evidence had been collected. Witnesses had been interviewed. Medical findings had been completed. The cell phone video had been examined repeatedly by investigators, legal experts, and independent analysts. Every frame had been slowed, enlarged, and reviewed from multiple perspectives. Public discussion had become relentless, but behind the headlines, prosecutors faced a far more difficult responsibility. They had to answer a single question. Did the available evidence satisfy the legal standard required to bring criminal charges against Officer Daniel Pantaleo? That decision would not be made in front of television cameras. It would be made inside a grand jury room. Unlike a criminal trial, grand jury proceedings are conducted in secret under New York law. Their purpose is not to determine guilt or innocence, but to decide whether prosecutors have presented sufficient evidence to justify formal criminal charges. The secrecy serves several purposes. It protects witnesses. It preserves the integrity of ongoing investigations. It prevents individuals from being publicly accused without legal justification. But secrecy also creates frustration, particularly in cases already attracting enormous public attention. Outside the courthouse, millions of Americans believed they had already seen the evidence with their own eyes. Inside, jurors would evaluate much more than a single video. They would review testimony, medical findings, police reports, departmental procedures, expert opinions, legal definitions that often differ sharply from public expectations. For prosecutors, the burden was substantial. It was not enough to show that a death had occurred. It was not enough to establish that police restraint contributed to that death. To pursue criminal charges, prosecutors had to determine whether the available evidence could prove every required legal element beyond a reasonable doubt before a trial jury. That standard exists in every criminal case, regardless of public attention. As the grand jury proceedings unfolded, demonstrations continued throughout New York City. Activists organized marches demanding accountability. Community leaders called for transparency. Religious organizations held prayer vigils. Civil rights advocates argued that Garner's death represented a broader pattern requiring urgent reform. Meanwhile, police organizations urged the public to allow the legal process to proceed without political pressure. The atmosphere across the city became increasingly tense. Every development generated national headlines. Every rumor spread rapidly through social media. Yet almost nothing from inside the grand jury room became public. The silence fueled speculation. Without access to testimony or evidence presented during the proceedings, observers attempted to predict the outcome based upon the publicly available video. Many believed criminal charges were inevitable. Others believed prosecutors would struggle to satisfy the demanding legal standards governing criminal liability for on-duty police officers. Weeks passed. Then months. The investigation continued while the country watched. On December 3, 2014, the decision became public. The grand jury declined to indict Daniel Pantaleo. No criminal charges would be filed. The announcement spread across the country within minutes. Television networks interrupted regular programming. News websites published breaking alerts. Social media platforms filled almost instantly with reactions ranging from disbelief to anger, relief, disappointment, and confusion. For Eric Garner's family, the decision was devastating. After months of waiting, they had hoped criminal charges would allow the case to proceed to trial. Instead, the legal process ended before a trial could even begin. Family members publicly expressed profound disappointment, emphasizing that while the grand jury had reached its legal conclusion, their search for accountability would continue. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered almost immediately. Some stood silently holding signs. Others chanted Garner's now famous final words. The demonstrations remained largely peaceful, though emotions were unmistakably intense. Many protesters argued that the cell phone video clearly demonstrated conduct deserving criminal prosecution. Others questioned whether the legal system treated police officers differently from ordinary citizens. The debate expanded far beyond one individual officer. Across New York City, thousands of people marched through streets carrying candles, banners, and photographs of Eric Garner. Traffic slowed. Major intersections filled with demonstrators. Community leaders addressed crowds using portable loudspeakers. Many participants described their presence not only as support for the Garner family, but as concern over broader questions involving policing and racial justice. The demonstrations quickly spread beyond New York. Cities across the United States organized marches of their own. From Los Angeles to Chicago, from Washington to Atlanta, crowds gathered demanding reforms. Although each community possessed its own local concerns, Eric Garner's death had become a shared national symbol. One phrase appeared almost everywhere. "I can't breathe." The words were printed on signs. Displayed across T-shirts. Repeated during speeches. Echoed through crowded streets. What had begun as a statement of physical distress during a police encounter had become a powerful expression of protest. For many Americans, those words represented concerns extending beyond one case. For others, they reflected grief over a life lost during an arrest for a low-level offense. The phrase transcended the immediate facts of the investigation. It entered American history. Meanwhile, legal experts offered competing analyses of the grand jury's decision. Some argued that the outcome reflected the extraordinarily high burden required in criminal prosecutions involving police use of force. Others questioned whether existing legal standards adequately addressed situations involving deaths during arrests. Former prosecutors noted that grand juries evaluate legal elements rather than public emotion. Civil rights attorneys argued that legal standards themselves deserved reconsideration. Neither side disputed that Eric Garner had died. The disagreement centered upon criminal responsibility. Throughout these debates, one important distinction often required clarification. The grand jury's decision not to indict did not determine that every action taken during the arrest complied with departmental policy. Criminal law and administrative discipline operate under different standards. An officer may avoid criminal prosecution while still facing internal professional consequences. That possibility remained very much alive. Within the New York Police Department, internal disciplinary review continued independently. Investigators examined whether Pantaleo's actions violated department rules governing use of force and prohibited restraint techniques. Unlike criminal prosecutors, departmental officials evaluated compliance with professional standards rather than criminal statutes. The legal story, therefore, was far from over. Federal authorities also continued monitoring developments. The United States Department of Justice announced that it would conduct an independent civil rights investigation into the incident. Federal civil rights law differs from state criminal law. The investigation sought to determine whether federal criminal statutes had been violated during the encounter. That process would require years. For Eric Garner's family, patience became increasingly difficult. Each passing month extended uncertainty. Public attention remained intense, but media cycles gradually shifted toward newer stories. Families, however, do not experience grief according to news schedules. Their loss remained constant. Garner's wife emerged as one of the most visible advocates for continued accountability and police reform. Speaking publicly on numerous occasions, she emphasized that her family's efforts extended beyond seeking justice for Eric alone. She hoped future families would never experience similar loss. Her message resonated with many communities already questioning relationships between law enforcement and the neighborhoods they served. At the same time, many police officers across the country expressed concern about the broader impact of the case upon policing. Some worried that officers might hesitate during dangerous situations for fear of legal consequences or public criticism. Others emphasized the need for improved training, clearer policies, and stronger community relationships. The conversation became increasingly nuanced. It was no longer simply about one arrest. It involved questions reaching into every aspect of modern policing. How much force is appropriate when someone resists arrest? How should officers recognize evolving medical emergencies? What role should cell phone recordings play during investigations? How can departments strengthen public trust while ensuring officer safety? No single investigation could answer all those questions. Yet Eric Garner's death ensured they would be asked more frequently than ever before. The case also accelerated discussion regarding police body cameras. Many policymakers argued that recordings from officers themselves could provide additional perspectives beyond civilian cell phone videos. Departments across the country began expanding body-worn camera programs in subsequent years, though debates regarding privacy, transparency, and implementation continued. History often reveals turning points only in retrospect. At the time, participants rarely recognize the lasting significance of events unfolding around them. By the end of 2014, however, it had become increasingly clear that Eric Garner's death represented one of those moments. The legal process had produced one outcome. The public conversation had produced another. Neither would be the final chapter. Years of additional investigations still remained. Federal authorities had not completed their review. The NYPD's disciplinary proceedings continued. Civil litigation remained unresolved. Most importantly, the broader national debate over policing, accountability, and public trust had only grown stronger. The grand jury's decision closed one legal door. It opened many others. And although Daniel Pantaleo would not face state criminal prosecution, the questions surrounding his actions, and the consequences they would ultimately carry, were far from finished. The grand jury's decision not to indict Daniel Pantaleo marked the end of one legal process, but it did not end the case. If anything, it signaled the beginning of an even longer chapter. For Eric Garner's family, the announcement had brought disappointment rather than closure. They had hoped the evidence would be examined in a public courtroom before a trial jury. Instead, the criminal case at the state level ended without formal charges ever being filed. Outside the courthouse, thousands of demonstrators filled the streets of New York. Some carried photographs of Eric Garner. Others held signs displaying the words that had become inseparable from the case. Candles flickered during evening vigils. Church leaders prayed alongside community activists. Entire city blocks echoed with chants demanding accountability and reform. The protests were not limited to Staten Island. They spread throughout Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx before reaching cities across the United States. In Washington, Chicago, Los Angeles, Boston, Atlanta, Seattle, and dozens of other communities, people gathered to express grief, frustration, and concern over the broader relationship between police departments and the communities they served. Although the demonstrations reflected many different viewpoints, one common message emerged. For many participants, Eric Garner's death represented more than an isolated tragedy. It symbolized a larger conversation about police accountability, race, public trust, and the use of force. While public demonstrations continued, another legal process quietly moved forward. The United States Department of Justice had opened an independent federal civil rights investigation. Unlike the state grand jury, federal prosecutors examined whether the evidence supported criminal charges under federal civil rights statutes. Those laws require prosecutors to prove that an officer willfully deprived a person of constitutional rights. The legal standard is exceptionally demanding. It is not enough to establish that mistakes occurred. It is not enough to demonstrate poor judgment. Federal prosecutors must prove criminal intent beyond a reasonable doubt under the specific requirements established by federal law. That burden explains why relatively few police encounters result in successful federal criminal prosecutions. The investigation became painstakingly detailed. Federal attorneys reviewed witness interviews, medical findings, departmental policies, expert opinions, training records, video evidence. Every available document received careful examination. Years passed while the investigation remained active. Public attention naturally shifted toward other national events. New incidents involving police use of force generated additional headlines. Political administrations changed. Public officials came and went. Yet inside federal offices, the Garner investigation continued. For Eric Garner's family, those years were marked by uncertainty. Every few months, new reports suggested that federal prosecutors might soon announce a decision. Each report raised hope. Each delay extended the wait. Meanwhile, another process continued within the New York City Police Department. Unlike criminal proceedings, internal disciplinary reviews focus upon professional conduct. The question before departmental officials was not whether Pantaleo had committed a crime. It was whether his actions complied with NYPD rules and standards governing the use of force. Department regulations had prohibited chokeholds since 1993. That policy became central to the disciplinary hearing. Police trainers, supervisors, and use of force experts examined the available evidence in extraordinary detail. They reviewed the video repeatedly. They considered officer training. They evaluated whether the restraint used during the arrest violated departmental policy. Administrative hearings differ significantly from criminal trials. The rules of evidence are different. The burden of proof is lower. The purpose is not imprisonment, but determining whether an officer remains fit to continue serving within the department. Years after Eric Garner's death, the administrative proceedings finally reached a conclusion. The hearing officer determined that Daniel Pantaleo had used a prohibited chokehold and recommended that he be dismissed from the New York City Police Department. The recommendation moved to Police Commissioner James O'Neill for final review. In August 2019, more than 5 years after Eric Garner died on the sidewalk of Bay Street, Commissioner O'Neill announced his decision. Daniel Pantaleo would be terminated from the NYPD. The decision ended his career as a New York City police officer. During the public announcement, the commissioner acknowledged the difficult and painful nature of the case while emphasizing that maintaining public trust required accountability when department rules were violated. For some observers, the dismissal represented long-awaited recognition that departmental standards had not been followed. For others, it raised concerns regarding how officers would make split-second decisions if they feared career-ending consequences after difficult encounters. As had happened throughout the case, reactions remained deeply divided. Only weeks before Pantaleo's dismissal, the Department of Justice announced the conclusion of its federal investigation. Federal prosecutors determined that the available evidence did not satisfy the demanding legal standard necessary to pursue federal criminal civil rights charges. No federal criminal prosecution would occur. The announcement closed the final major criminal investigation connected to Eric Garner's death. Legally, Daniel Pantaleo would never stand trial on criminal charges arising from the incident. For the Garner family, however, justice could not be measured solely by criminal prosecutions. Another important legal matter had already reached resolution through the civil court system. In 2015, the City of New York agreed to pay approximately $5.9 million to settle a wrongful death claim brought by Garner's family. As is common in many civil settlements, the agreement resolved the lawsuit without the city admitting legal liability. Civil settlements operate under different legal principles than criminal proceedings. Their purpose is to resolve claims seeking financial compensation rather than criminal punishment. Although no amount of money could replace a husband, father, or grandfather, the settlement acknowledged the profound loss experienced by Garner's family and brought one portion of the litigation to a close. Yet even after criminal investigations, disciplinary proceedings, and civil litigation had all concluded, the broader impact of the case continued expanding. Police departments throughout the United States began reviewing restraint policies. Many agencies reinforced restrictions on neck restraints. Training programs increasingly emphasized recognizing medical distress during physical encounters. Supervisors revisited use of force guidelines. Some departments introduced additional de-escalation training. Others accelerated adoption of body-worn camera programs to provide more complete documentation of police encounters. Lawmakers also responded. In New York State, legislation addressing police restraint techniques eventually became part of broader reform efforts following renewed national discussions about policing. Public pressure for greater transparency, improved accountability, and clearer standards continued growing throughout the following years. The phrase, "I can't breathe," remained deeply embedded in public consciousness. It appeared on murals, memorials, educational exhibits, books examining modern American history, academic research discussing policing and criminal justice. The words became more than a recollection of one man's final moments. They became a reminder of unresolved questions surrounding authority, responsibility, and human dignity. For Eric Garner's family, however, no historical significance could erase personal grief. Media attention eventually diminished. Political debates evolved. Public demonstrations became less frequent. But birthdays still arrived. Holidays still came. Family celebrations still contained one empty place that could never again be filled. That quiet reality often receives less attention than courtroom decisions or political speeches. History remembers events. Families remember people. Looking back, the legal journey surrounding Eric Garner's death illustrates how different justice systems often pursue different objectives. The criminal justice system asks whether evidence proves guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Administrative discipline asks whether professional standards were violated. Civil courts address financial responsibility for harm. Public opinion asks broader moral questions that legal institutions cannot always answer. Each system reached its own conclusion. None satisfied everyone. Perhaps that is why the case continues to be studied more than a decade later. Not because every question has been answered, but because so many important questions remain. How should police balance authority with restraint? What responsibilities accompany the power to arrest? How should departments respond when policy violations contribute to tragedy? Can public trust be restored after highly publicized incidents? These questions extend beyond one officer, one family, or one city. They reach into every community where law enforcement and the public interact each day. By the time Daniel Pantaleo left the New York Police Department in 2019, the legal chapter of the case had largely concluded. The historical chapter had only begun. Future generations would continue examining the events of July 17, 2014, not only as the story of one fatal encounter on Bay Street, but as one of the defining moments that reshaped discussions of policing, accountability, and justice throughout the United States.